You're about to hear a rebroadcast of Where We Live. It originally aired October 22nd, 2019.
This is Where We Live from Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel. It's often said that children need to develop certain social skills, like learning how to communicate with others and how to make friends. But what's at stake if these skills aren't learned? A child may never gain confidence, and that loneliness and anxiety could follow him or her into adulthood. Today, parenting coach Caroline Maguire joins us. She's the author of Why Will No One Play With Me? The Play Better plan to help children of all ages make friends and thrive. Are you a parent who worries about this for your child or children? You can join us. Find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. Author Caroline Maguire is joining us today via Skype. Caroline, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Lucy.
I'm curious to start off, what prompted you to write this book, Caroline?
So years ago, when I first started working with children and families, I kept encountering the fact that if children don't have services through school, they really get no help with friendship. Yet as parents, we face this constantly. Constantly we have to talk about friendship. And I encountered a little boy who was asking me why no one would play with him. And it just struck me that kids are not concerned about academics. They're not concerned about a lot of things we as adults are concerned about. They are concerned about, feeling comfortable in their own skin, where to sit, what to do. And so I started looking for a guide for parents that's user-friendly, not full of jargon. And I couldn't find anything. And it started to strike me like, what if I could write that and give that to parents?
You mentioned that some children receive services through school, but often when they're evaluated, it's for a child or children that may have high needs. But there's a lot of kids that maybe fall in between. Is that who this book is for?
Absolutely. This book is for both the children who have high needs because their parents are also on the front lines trying to carry things through into daily life. But really, there's millions of children who fall into the awkward, shy, quirky, it's not working out, we've moved too much, and so now things are hard. And just, all those phases of life that we can all remember where making a new group of friends or fitting in with people is really complicated.
We all remember, especially if we're adults, that at some point in our childhood or adolescence, things were awkward. And at some point, many of us may have struggled. When you were writing this book, why is this book more relevant now than ever before, Caroline?
Well, I think we are facing sort of a national crisis around social media and devices. So parents are really struggling with that, eroding social skills, kids with their face in their phone all the time. And I also think we are also looking at record depression numbers for kids, unfortunately, record numbers of suicides. And there's article after article in the zeitgeist about anxiety in children and stress. And so I feel now parents are under such pressure to answer these concerns and help their children, but yet they had no playbook. And so parents are really struggling without that information.
I have two children myself, and oftentimes getting them to even tell you about how their school day was is a challenge because they don't always want to talk about school or want to recount the day for you. So I guess the first step, Caroline, is how do parents get their children to talk to them so that they know if they're struggling with social skills or even making friends?
Absolutely. So one of the centerpieces of Why Will No One Play With Me, and I have more about this at my website, CarolineMaguireAuthor.com, including videos, is this open-ended questions of coaching, which is basically that you ask questions, not an interrogation, but, what's going on for you? What does friendship look like these days? And you ask questions and you sort of reflect, you recap what they're saying. And what it does is it sort of neutralizes things and it creates a lighter feel to the conversation, and it gives parents a communication technique, frankly, to talk about anything hard. Because you're right, Often kids have trouble opening up or even remembering why they're in a bad mood, right? The mood started, at 10 a.m. when someone wouldn't be in a group with them. And then it just carries through, and you get the kid who, kind of explodes at you or says they're fine. And so part of the methodology While No One Play With Me is to teach parents how to have those conversations so that you can find out the genesis of the mood you're facing.
What about obviously teaching a parent how to talk to their child, depending on their day is important. But, how often should parents be reaching out to maybe other adults that are in their child's life, whether it's a teacher, a coach, maybe their dance teacher, in terms of seeing, what else is going on with their child when a parent is not around? And then how do you, I guess, balance that so that you're not becoming a helicopter parent, so to speak, that you're intruding too much?
I absolutely hear this all the time where parents are so concerned about becoming helicopter parents. Yet when I work with schools are so often saying to me, we didn't know how bad things were. We would love to have helped. So I would urge parents to reach out in a non-dramatic way and tell the teacher what is going on, tell the school, tell the coach, and say, I have a kid who doesn't talk much, or I'm trying to get a lay of the land. And actually, While No One Play With Me even has scripts and ways to do this. And my experience is that teachers don't take this as you're a helicopter. They take it as everybody needs information. The other tip I have is siblings, if they're not going to make fun, if they're going to be supportive, cousins, family, friends, if you know a teacher in the school, because I think we do need that crucial information. Many of the kids I work with, when we do this, we find out that the child is not even going to the cafeteria, right? They're going to the library, they're skipping lunch, they're skipping social opportunity. And you as a parent are being told, oh, I go every day. So you don't know.
You're hearing Caroline McGuire. She's an author of Why Will No One Play With Me? The Play Better Plan to help children of all ages make friends and thrive. She's joining us today via Skype. Caroline, besides being an author, you're also an executive function and social skills coach. So let's also start there when we talk about executive function. What do you mean, and how does that play into what we're talking about today, which is helping children learn to handle themselves in social situations and to make friends?
Absolutely. So executive function is the management system of the brain. It is the hub of the brain. All the processes that control attention, planning, organization, self-awareness, all of these are executive functions. So they affect both academics and also they affect social. And so one of the things that has evolved in the sort of academic world and professional world is that we all kind of know that these processes affect everything and that we can develop the skills and strengthen those executive functions if they're weak. And many times when kids have struggles socially, they don't read the room, they're, their tone isn't great, they're too much or too little. It's all about those executive functions. And we know from all kinds of research that we can develop them. And that's really the basis of Why Will No One Play With Me, is my years of work and research and how to strengthen those in your child or teen without it being, something that you have to search the earth for the answers. It's all right there.
We talked about learning how to communicate with your child, especially if they don't want to share with you the details of their day. But talk a little bit more about when you were working with particular clients. In your book, you mentioned Jonah, who you said that kind of started the whole ball rolling to write this book, where children, they want to not be isolated and they want to be able to fit in. But you write, if they could, they would. Explain that some more for us.
I believe that many times as parents, we get caught in this can't versus won't loop, and we worry about, giving in to our kids or that they're being willful. But really, I think that when children can do well, they do well. And if they're not producing the skills that we need them to, it's usually because they can't. And so, I guess I used to say to mothers and fathers, if they could, they would. And so when I was writing the book, I reached out to many families who I'd worked with over the years, and they all came back to me and said how powerful that was, how releasing it was, that those 5 words allowed them to say, okay, I wouldn't expect them to swim without, coaching. Why am I expecting them to do this without coaching?
Earlier, you talked about with social media, it's easier to become isolated. We know that bullying can be a factor when a child is struggling in school or in other activities. We're actually talking to you in October when it's National Bullying Prevention Month. Just the other day, Hearst Connecticut media reporting that youth suicide rates in our state have almost doubled in a year. From your perspective, how should we be approaching this, Caroline?
Well, obviously, if your child says anything about taking their life or self-harm, I want you to reach out to a medical professional. But I think one of the things that is coming up is that what we're doing to address bullying is simply not working. The bully, the bystander, and the victim are all in a situation where they need help from us as adults. They need support. The bystander doesn't know what to do. And so that adds to stress and depression. The bully is bullying because of some unmet need, something that's going on for them, low self-esteem, seeing violence in their home, something, maybe their own social skills aren't great. And so they lash out. That happens a lot. And then the victim, and I was horribly bullied, but I know that when we give children the skills to fit in, they no longer are able to be an easy target. So all of these different parties need help. And I think that as we look at the stats, which you're quoting, we have to do something different.
What's the role that schools play in this? We hear because of these incidents where bullying unfortunately has led to suicide. Schools appear to be taking preventative efforts, trying to put forth this anti-bullying climate. But do they have the right skills and resources when you think about the variety of adults that are interacting with our children in school each day?
I think schools are trying really hard, and I think they are doing much better and really trying to be on it. I want to say that first. This is in no way a criticism, but the average teacher is not being given tools to help in these situations. They're not being given support and education. And, everything happens on the bus and on the playground. And just the way the logistics of our academic system are set up, it's very hard to get those folks training, yet they are the people seeing things repeatedly. So this is in no way a criticism of our schools, but I know that I have been working with several school districts trying to get training for the aides and playground folks and also the bus drivers. And it is Herculean trying to make this happen. And yet, if you ask any parent who's witnessing all this, that's where everything is going on. So I hope that as we, are looking at things, we will get teachers and educators more tools and support, because my experience is that they need it.
You're hearing Caroline Maguire, author of Why Will No One Play With Me? The Play Better Plan to Help Children of All Ages Make Friends and Thrive. We're going to delve deeper into some of the steps in her book coming up. I wanted to take a call. Nazarene is calling from New Haven. Nazarene, you're on the show.
Yes, hi, good morning. I just wanted to make a comment and have a question. My comment is, I feel like parents are completely are their kids' role models, and if they're not available and there's no socializing happening in their homes, and which is something that is taught through your parents, I believe. But there's also not a place for kids to be able to express themselves enough during the day as they sit in classrooms all day long. And I don't think the school's is enough place for them to be able to learn that skill. So my question to you is, at what point do we then say, if the school is not doing enough, where can we go with our students to get enough help for them for socializing?
Great question. Caroline?
I love this question. Thank you for asking it. I want to say first, yes, we are our children's greatest role model. And one of the things that I talk about in Why Will No One Play With Me is how to facilitate more social interaction within your family. And also, you can be teaching these social skills lessons using your extended family. You go to Thanksgiving, there's lots of people watching to read the room, and a lot of the lessons call upon that. I think also we do have to do things outside of school. And that's really the reason for the book, is that this way parents can facilitate this more outside of school, where we have a great deal of opportunity, but also to educate parents and give them support, because there's a lot to it. And I think that some kids do not learn naturally from role models. I meet many parents, and we know this from research, who are great socially, but their kid, for whatever reason, due to weak executive function, just doesn't pick it up easily. So I think we are role models, and then we also are their coach.
We got a tweet from a listener who writes, how are the concerns, or better yet, strategies different for parents raising an only child? And is the data notably different for kids with siblings in terms of how they gain social skills, Caroline?
That's a great question. I'm an only child, and I speak to many only children across the country. And I think what the statistics and the research shows us is that children need frequent social interaction, especially unstructured play, even teenagers. Unstructured meaning not us, taking them to soccer, but more them playing with someone else. And so one of the things we find with only children isn't that they are, without those opportunities because they don't have siblings. It's really more about, do we engage and play with other kids? You can have siblings who you're in a house and you don't even talk to them, right? So it's all about engaging with other kids and getting that practice of play, where you learn to work things out, and you learn to negotiate, and you learn to pretend and use your imagination.
Caroline McGuire is with me again via Skype, author of Why Will No One Play With Me? She is a social skills coach. We're going to continue to talk with her after the break. And you can join us too. Are you worried about your child's social skills but not sure how to step in? We want to hear from you. Find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live.
You're listening to a rebroadcast of Where We Live. It originally aired October 22nd, 2019.
This is Where We Live from Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel. My guest today is Caroline McGuire. She's a social skills coach who helps parents work with their child who's struggling socially. Caroline is the author of the new book, Why Will No One Play With Me? The Play Better Plan to help children of all ages make friends and thrive. She's joining me today via Skype. Caroline, you mentioned that you were an only child, but you also have another personal connection to what you write about in this book. What was your childhood like in terms of how you were adapting to being in school and making friends?
So I was sort of an old soul. I was one of those people watching Upstairs, Downstairs, and, reading Agatha Christie novels. I went every day after school to my grandparents' house. So in addition to being an only child, raised by my mom is an introvert, and she has friends, but she isn't, reaching out. I was with my grandparents talking about World War II. So I was a very bookish child, and I really struggled, especially because I was in a very small school. There were all these factors. And by 7th grade, I had been bullied pretty badly. And I really had to sort of shift and learn how to relate to other kids. So I had to do some work because I really didn't know what other kids were into. I didn't watch their shows. I didn't listen to what they were listening to. And I had to really change things. And I did, thanks to a teacher. So I've been there, and I also know how much better things can be. And by the way, I haven't lost who I was. I just have gained friends.
You mentioned a teacher helped you. So what did he or she exactly do, and how do you reflect that in your book, Caroline?
I reflected in the book by talking a little bit about my conversations with her and just, this need for me to change. And what she did was sort of to have these weekly meetings with me and to talk to me about observing and really what is it that they are talking about, and who would you like to be friends with, and how do you need to kind of speak their language. And it had occurred to me, but it was very empowering to have someone say, you can do this. I think one of the great things that came out of that is that I really, really relate to these kids. And I also know that change is hard and what they're going through.
Can you walk us through some steps for parents who may be listening, who want to know, well, how do I get my child to move out of his or her comfort zone?
A lot of times when kids are struggling with this, it becomes sort of the elephant in the room, and it also becomes sort of a flashpoint topic. And that's one reason that a lot of the book talks about how to communicate about this. I would start with questions and chats about friendship that don't mention social skills and don't say, you need these to be improved, but really focus on what they want. The other thing is that a lot of times what we're asking of the child or teen is to exit their comfort zone. So I have a few exercises in Why Will No One Play With Me that talk about, your comfort zone and what behaviors you do in your comfort zone and out. I would encourage parents to pave the way by starting to talk about comfort zone, talk about your go-tos, talk about your need to get help, talk about things you do that are uncomfortable. And if you don't reach out for help, if you don't do things that are uncomfortable, start to model that. Because when a family demonstrates that we are people who seek help when we need it, it's a lot easier to get the child to move out of their comfort zone. And the other thing is to volunteer, and there's scripts and everything in the book for this, to do something that the child knows are outside of your comfort zone. So a personal example is that my daughter heard me on the radio. She heard me talking about this. And so I am going to run a road race, and she's working on some things outside of her comfort zone. And I will tell you, it is very far outside of my comfort zone.
Parents sometimes stress out if they offer incentives to their child to go along with their plan, or bribes, so to speak. I mean, how do you approach that, Caroline?
So I think that we know what's best for our children in many ways, but we have to remember they don't always know. They don't always have the maturity and the self-awareness. And there has to be a degree of what's in it for me, right? Why do you want me to do this change? Why would I exit my comfort zone? And what's in it for me? Bribes are when we say, if you stop that right now, I'll give you a cookie. An incentive is something where they demonstrate, and this is all covered in Why Will No One Play With Me, they demonstrate something and then they are given some kind of incentive. And the incentive can be non-traditional. If you engage on this, then I'm willing to talk about giving you more freedom that, not a conversation I was willing to engage in before. Parents are very leery too, because so many reward charts and things just are really cumbersome. But I think part of this is really that conversation and that collaboration. It doesn't have to be a reward chart.
I was thinking to how my children have developed social skills, or still developing social skills. And oftentimes it starts with play. You write in your book, play is the first and most natural environment for all learning. From your experience, Caroline, is that what's missing in school environments today, that child's ability to be creative, to have that time to figure things out where they're not stuck just learning their lessons?
Absolutely. We have dramatically cut down the amount of time children play. And it is absolutely, the vitamin to help them grow. And we also have a much more structured society nowadays. So it used to be that, in the 70s, you came home and you played outside and it wasn't structured, and you played with all kinds of different people, by the way. And then, you went inside when the lights were gone. And I think that it will be hard to recreate that now, but we do need to give our children more opportunity for play, because that's actually what leads to a lot of the creativity and social skills that we are seeking for our kids.
But how do we do that when today, as we've talked about, kids are heavily influenced by electronics and internet? Someone called in to make that exact point.
Absolutely. It is, I think the electronics are here, and to pretend they're not is really not serving anyone. Absolutely. I think that as a family, we have to look at making choices and creating those opportunities. So if your kid is super overscheduled, maybe you retrench a little bit. We know from statistics that is not actually going to affect their college chances. It's really about them having the right opportunities. The other thing is that we set some boundaries with electronics and engage in really collaborative conversations. Don't just ban, talk about it. Why do you care about electronics? What's different? What are your concerns? And take times when you facilitate that so that they're not, having to make that choice themselves, which is really tough.
Jeff's calling from Darien. Jeff, you're on the show.
Good morning. You mentioned there's a lot of research that shows executive function can be improved in children and teens. I was wondering if you could share any insights from that research, and would that process also be applicable for adults that have challenges with executive function?
Caroline?
Absolutely. Executive function can be improved over the lifespan. And the research really shows, and my own personal experience, that we have to not only model, but create situations where you're learning the skills that are in the real world. So in other words, if you're learning future thinking, which affects academics, planning, getting gas so you don't run out, that it is a skill being built and facilitated in real life situations, not in a vacuum. And that we also have to support kids, with checklists and reminders and, play better plan lessons. And then at some point, we have to allow them to practice and generalize. And it's that practice that actually makes it stick. So it's absolutely something that can be built. And the more we allow them to sort of develop, and then we retrench a little bit, and we allow those things to be worked on by the child and not us facilitating everything they do, the more they're going to develop those skills.
When we talked about play being fundamental and helps develop social skills of children, Caroline, when we think about unstructured play, what are we talking about exactly? Not just putting them in activities outside of school, but how do you promote that within your child's schedule?
Absolutely. I think when a child is in structured situations, it's, soccer, it's guided, right? It's when you're guided by an adult and an adult is intervening. So by unstructured, what I mean is play in the backyard where a bunch of kids are running around and they're inventing their own games, and you are not the puppeteer. You are not facilitating. And how to bring that to their lives is, we are a play date society now. We are not all living in, neighborhoods where everybody is the same age. And so one of the things we can do as parents is have kids over, bring them to parks, bring them to opportunities where they can play, and then not to, be the game maker. Let them work things out between them and create time and space for that.
But what happens if that play date, so to speak, doesn't go as planned, and a parent sees their child still struggling and not having fun? I mean, again, how should parents be interacting with their children where they're not hovering?
Absolutely. So in Why Will No One Play With Me, I talk a lot about this very dilemma because everybody who's listening to this intently is in that dilemma, right? The play dates are not going well and they're trying to figure it out. And what I have is a system to teach skills and guide and to give the child sort of a single mission for the play date of a behavior that you're working on, like, taking deep breaths or sharing something when they don't usually, or, I have kids who literally even dictate every choice that's made on the play date. They literally tell the other kid what juice box they can have. And, that doesn't go over. So we're giving the child a mission, we're stepping back, and then there's actually ways to then after debrief about the play date and continue to grow working on those skills for next time. And I also give a lot of tips around how to pre-plan the play date a little more so you're choosing a climate, an environment, and a friend who is going to make it so that the child can practice these skills. End of the day, they're exhausted. They may not be able to produce what we're asking them to.
Did you ever run into, parents who, everyone wants the best for their child, Caroline, but there's also the added stress of many parents wanting their kids to be academically successful and to get into the school that the parents think is going to give them a better chance at employment, maybe go to the alma mater of the family. And so how do they balance all of that? Because, oftentimes the parents can add a lot of stress to a child's life.
Absolutely. I went to Trinity right there in Connecticut, and I would love my children to go to Trinity. But I also know that we know that a lot of the academic stress we are putting on children is not resulting in them actually being more successful. It's resulting in them being stressed out and actually some pretty negative mental health consequences. And I think the fact is that if you are building these life skills, and I think social skills and these academic skills are life skills, just like changing a tire, your chances of actually helping them to be able to complete the academic work are greater because, you're not going to college with them. You're not going to their first job with them. And so we want to give them opportunities. If you facilitate everything, I always joke, I already went to high school, so I don't need to go back. If you facilitate everything, then they're not really learning. And I think we as parents have to, take a breath and realize that we're trying to build life skills, not make sure everything is perfect.
My guest today is Caroline McGuire, author of the book, Why Will No One Play With Me? The Play Better Plan to Help Children of All Ages Make Friends and Thrive. Caroline, you spend time in your book really delving into brain science so that readers understand, the factors that cause kids to be left out. We mentioned, these skills, these executive function skills. But for parents who really are kind of on the fence about, again, wanting to intervene, what are some red flags? Is it really intuitive, or what's some advice that you can give for parents that they can look at their child and see, maybe there needs to be some intervention?
So if a child is perpetually left out, they're not invited, that is one red flag. The other red flag is that you're hearing from schools, coaches, teachers that they aren't able to join a group, they aren't able to fit in. The other red flag is that I have 7 things everyone needs to be able to do socially in the book. And parents can look at those 7 things, and they're things like reading the room, being adaptive, meeting people halfway. And if your child isn't able to do these, in an age appropriate way, the same as their peers, then those are red flags because ultimately these are the things that we have to be able to do in order to be in the workplace, in order to, work in a group as adults. So I would encourage parents to understand that, some kids just don't come to this naturally. And if you find that your child cannot meet new people, make friends, join a group, work with others, then they just need some help with this, just like they need help with tying their shoes or learning to ride a bike.
And for the parents or parent who may be an introvert, and it might be hard for them to even reach out to another parent to try to schedule a play date to help their child, I mean, is that the time to bring in a professional? And what's your advice to parents?
Well, I think parents always put the oxygen mask on first. Many introverts have friends and have wonderful, rich lives. And sometimes it is something where they are really able to facilitate that. I don't want to say that they can't. And I think when we are looking at our children's well-being, some of it is, if this is hard for you, then to work on that for yourself and to work on facilitating that and making that easier. And actually, the information Why Will No One Play With Me can help parents as well, and has helped many, many parents. But I think the biggest thing is, if you're aware of these struggles for yourself, then as you work on them with your child, you'll be growing as well.
We heard from someone on Facebook. Katie writes, I have a middle-aged relative with no social skills and a complete lack of ability to read social cues. If there had been diagnoses when she was young, she would probably have been diagnosed with ADD and receptive information deficits. What kind of interventions are available for adults who have difficulties with social interactions? You know, it relates to my previous question. Again, your book focusing on how parents can help their children, but for people who have adults in their lives that are also struggling, what can you tell them?
Well, I absolutely think that the adult struggle is real and is there, and it is so important. And there's a few things. One, on my website, CarolineMcGuireAuthor.com, I do have some things for adults. My intention is that book 2 will be for adults. There are also opportunities through a group that I work with where we have adult social skills groups. We have adult virtual social skills groups at ADD.org. The other thing I want to say is that adults can use the learnings from something like Why Will No One Play With Me, because I do use these lessons. They just don't have cute visuals, with adults. And I think adults tend to get very overwhelmed. So I would encourage any adult who's trying to work on this to set a mission. And that mission might be one thing that they're going to work on. And every time you enter or exit a new place, that's your cue to try to be more tuned in. But it really does sometimes take an adult following lessons like this and working on it. And it's totally possible. I've had clients who are 60. I've had clients who are 6. They all can change.
Carolyn McGuire is a parenting coach and author of Why Will No One Play With Me? The Play Better Plan to help children of all ages make friends and thrive. Caroline joined me today via Skype. Thanks so much, Caroline. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
This is Where We Live from Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel. Coming up, we're going to talk more about why it can be difficult to make friends as an adult and what we can do about it. Find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live.
You're listening to a rebroadcast of Where We Live. It originally aired October 22nd, 2019.
This is Where We Live from Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel. Where We Live on Connecticut Public Radio is hosting a coffee break at local coffee shops across Connecticut to hear from you. What issue or story in your community is not getting the attention it needs? I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel. Join me and the Where We Live team at Silk City Coffee in Manchester, Connecticut, Tuesday, December 10th. We can't wait to meet you. Check out Where We Live's Facebook page for more information. Now, adults have trouble making friends, too. What was your experience after graduating college, perhaps moving away from family and a home base where many of your friends still live?
Making friends as an adult is kind of like dating.
Does that ring true? You can join us. Find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. That clip you just heard comes from a recent series of episodes from NPR's Life Kit podcast. They were hosted and reported by my next guest, Julia Furlan, host and reporter for NPR's Life Kit podcast, joining us today from NPR's New York studios. Julia, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited.
We're excited for this conversation. So why focus in on adult friendship?
I just think that it's something that we do. We have friends from the time we're little. We have friends, throughout our entire lives. And it as I was like approaching the topics that I wanted to talk about on Life Kit, I was really interested in stories about friendships because they change, we change, and we don't always necessarily address that, And I think it was a good time to look at that.
There's different phases in adulthood. So when is it the trickiest to make friends, Julia?
Well, one of our guests, Heather Havrilesky, who is a wonderful advice columnist, she has a column called Ask Polly. She said that the 30s are the dark times. It's like the dark upside down of friendships because people are splitting off, getting married, having kids, and I mean it seems and trying to achieve in their careers, all of that stuff. And I feel like that sort of tracks. I think that there's lots of when everyone is underslept and trying to do too many things, it's hard to keep your friendships as the central priority of your life.
And what do you do when you don't like your child's friend's parents? That's actually, if they're listening, and I'm not talking about you specifically, but again, when you're stuck in these social situations, the birthday parties every weekend, and you see the same parents, but maybe they don't really have the same interests that you do.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that the previous guest, Caroline, said that really rang true was that parents need to put their oxygen mask on first. And sure, yes, you might have social situations that you don't want to go to. You might have to go to the birthday parties. You might have to stand awkwardly next to the punch bowl with someone that you would otherwise not be talking to. That makes a lot of sense. But I think that adults, as I reported these stories, the thing that kept coming to the surface was that we need to be able to prioritize friendship as a real necessary existing thing in our lives, no matter what else is going on. It doesn't matter if you're a parent. It doesn't matter if your job is completely intense. It doesn't matter what else is going on. If you want to have friendships, just like the woman at the top of the show said, friends are like dating. You have to sort of prioritize it. And I think that there is value to that. And I think that we as a society should sort of like make a little bit more space for people to say like, oh, I'm going to go and hang out with my friend, even though I have a 3-year-old and a full-time job,
So if you make plans with this new friend and you hang out and you realize, it's just not going to work, don't feel bad they don't call them again?
Yeah, I mean, I think that sometimes it's hard to like gauge exactly what's going on, but like there is one thing that I think is helpful is there's a woman named Shasta Nelson who has a book called Frientimacy, and she talks about basically that like that vulnerability and consistency should increase at the same rate. So basically like as you see somebody consistently, you should be opening up to them in a vulnerability way. And that sort of the way that those two things go up together is something that I think people, it just makes it very clear. You got to be vulnerable if you want to have a friend. That's how it goes,
I like that you brought up frientimacy because she also talks about the friendship triangle. Maybe that'll help listeners really grasp what we're talking about here if we think about it as a triangle.
Right. So the bottom of the triangle is positivity. And positivity doesn't necessarily mean that you feel great that like everything that you do with this one friend is like positive. It means that when you come away from being with that friend, you have that like, oh, okay, good. I feel good about this, like, oh, we had a really nice conversation. We had a really nice coffee talk. I feel like I understood and listened to. And then the other two arms of the triangle are vulnerability and consistency. And those two things are the sort of like basis of the triangle that will lead to frientimacy is what Shasta Nelson calls it. Great book, great TED Talk. Really recommend it.
Another tip that you have, again, Julia Furlan, host and reporter for NPR's Life Kit podcast. People like you more than you may think. And to get out of your head thinking that, oh gosh, maybe they don't really like me.
Yeah, I think everybody has this sort of inner monologue sometimes where they're like, you have a conversation and then you come away from that conversation, you're like, oh my gosh, I just, I sounded so silly. I didn't say the right thing, blah, blah, blah. there is research, actual like psychological research done by one of the sources on the show, or one of the guests on the show, Jillian Sandstrom, it's called the likability gap. And basically, people like you more than you think they do. And that little tiny bit of research maybe can counteract the negative voice in your head when you talk to someone. It basically says, when you talk to somebody, the chances are people are enjoying that conversation, and you don't need to like walk away and beat yourself up about it later.
I referenced, some of us move away from our hometowns and a lot of the people we went to school with, and it can be a struggle to make new friends in a new city. And so the next step is, if there's something you really like to do, maybe find a new hobby, and that might be where you find new friends.
I mean, it's so funny because it's like very much like grandma advice. It's like what your grandma would tell you, like, why don't you take up a hobby? But you know what? It works. I think that there's two things to that. You should follow the things that you already like to do. Do you like cooking? Are you into book clubs? Do you want to learn more about the brain? I don't know. There are lots of different things that you can do. And you follow that thing that you already like to do, and you give it some time. I think that the thing, like, there's find a hobby, yes, but you also have to sort of like find some consistency with it. So I would say don't just go one time once a month, for 2 months or something. You should take whatever it is, and if you want to make new friends, you have to go a couple of times, and maybe the first time is sort of awkward, but the second time is going to be a little bit less awkward, and more. And that sort of like consistent dedication is also an important part of the like find a hobby kind of thing.
Our tech producer, Kyone Wolf, suggests meetup.com, even Facebook groups. What do you think about those strategies?
Oh, absolutely. I think that we didn't focus on online stuff in the episodes, mainly because it's like it's such a rich environment. It was like so big, and there are so many different ways to find people. But there are apps, meetup.com. You can find a meetup in your area about basically, all different kinds of things. And there's also an app called Bumble BFF, where it's basically like it's like a dating app, but it's for friends. And I think that if I could do more episodes, I would definitely focus on online communities, because there is such a rich and beautiful environment of friendships that go from online and then they become real friendships.
Julia, we're almost out of time, but we got to talk about the breakup. How do we do it?
God. Treat it like an actual breakup is the advice from a lot of the reporting that I got. Basically, address the thing, address the rift, make it sort of explicit, but not necessarily, it doesn't need to be something where you're like, I will never speak to you again, but you can just say, like, I feel our friendship is changing. I want to address it, and I think we need to, move into a different sort of version of this friendship, where instead of texting all the time, where we speak, once every couple months, and that's sort of like what we're gonna do. Or I think it's time to break up as friends. It's hard, it's awkward. I haven't done it yet, so I don't know.
Well, Julia Furlan again is host and reporter for NPR's Life Kit podcast. I feel like we have a connection. Julia, do you want to be friends?
Listen, oh my God, I would love to be your friend.
Yes.
Oh, I love it. Okay, it's done.
All right, we're gonna hang out. We're gonna find each other on Facebook. Thanks to Lydia Brown for producing today's show. I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel. Thanks for listening.